Welcome to another one of Mr. Wildcat's editorials. I am your host, Mr. Wildcat. And before we begin, I'd like to remind you guys to don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my future videos. Okay? Whole bunch of wide variety material coming on down the road, and you're not going to want to miss any of it. Okay? So anyway, today we are going to be covering one of the most controversial relocations in sports history as we approach the 40th anniversary of the event. In fact, today's video is being dropped on the actual 40th anniversary of this actual relocation. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about the Mayflower move, the relocation of the Baltimore Colts to Indianapolis via the Mayflower. Okay? This video may be a little insensitive to those in Baltimore, Indianapolis, or Cleveland, and I do apologize if I do seem insensitive, but I like to bring this up to you right here and there, right here. This relocation happened 2.5 years before I was born. I am not from Baltimore. I am not from Indianapolis. I am not from Cleveland. I am not a fan of the Colts. I am not a fan of the Browns or the Ravens. So, with that in mind, please remember that I am very neutral, and the material that we're covering today is strictly through research that I have gotten regarding this event. And I know many of you guys out there have actually lived through these events, and some of you have probably had a huge impact on. Please feel free to share your reflections and experiences. And if there's anything that I'm missing here, please feel free to add it in the comment section below. Please keep your comments in the bounds of good taste, because I would not want to have to ban anybody from my channel like I have in some of my previous videos. Okay? So, let's not go there, shall we? You're more welcome to comment. Just be thoughtful and respectful, okay? Moving on. So anyway, what makes this controversial? Well, basically it's because it happened right in the middle of the night to everybody's surprise. Okay? And it happened during the overnight hours of during the nighttime of March 28th into the early hours of March 29th of 1984. Okay? So before we talk about the actual move, let's go into let's talk about the background. What actually triggered this move? So you have to go back to 1953 when the Baltimore Colts NFL franchise was officially founded. Okay, they were playing in a very they were playing in a pretty bad out of date and out of shape stadium called Memorial Stadium. Okay, so Memorial Stadium was originally built originally opened up on December 2nd, 1922, and it was renovated in the late 40s into December. It had a renovation that officially opened on April 20th, 1950, which included the balconies. Okay, for many, many years, this facility would be the home of both the Baltimore Colts of the National Football League and the Baltimore Orioles of Major League Baseball. Okay, and in fact, it was probably a better use of a baseball stadium. Okay, now keep in mind, back in the day, okay, up until like the late 90s, early 2000s, it was very normal for a wide variety of cities to have venues that basically hosted both football and baseball. Okay, San Diego had it with the Padres and Chargers. Anaheim had it at one point with the California Angels and the LA Rams. San Francisco had it with the Giants and 49ers. Oakland had it with the Raiders and Athletics. Seattle had it at one point with the Kingdome, which housed the Seahawks and the Mariners, and at one point also the Supersonics. Minnesota had it with the Metrodome and possibly Metropolitan Stadium with the Minnesota Twins and the Minnesota Vikings. St. Louis had it at one point with the Cardinals of baseball and Cardinals of football. Cleveland had it with the Browns and Indians. Cincinnati with the Bengals and Reds. Pittsburgh with the Steelers and Pirates. Philadelphia with the Eagles and Phillies. Thank you. Washington, D.C. with the Senators and the Redskins. Atlanta with the Falcons and Braves. Okay. And at one point, we also had in Miami, with the Marlins and the Dolphins. Okay. So it was pretty normal for cities to have venues that served capacity to both the Major League Baseball and National Football League. Okay. Memorial Stadium had been, by the time the Colts got up and started in 1953, the stadium was about 30 years old, and there was a lot of seats had obstructive views, and there wasn't enough office space for both the Colts and Orioles, and the balconies didn't go any further than the 50-yard line, so the press boxes and the TV providers, they had a hard time broadcasting football because it was a lot easier to cover Major League Baseball because you were able to broadcast from behind home plate. But with football, you weren't able to broadcast from center field. Center field is all it went. You were only able to broadcast from behind one end of the field, and it was very hard to broadcast from that particular area. Okay, but there was one thing that one advantage Baltimore had that other markets did not have in terms of football: a marching band. Okay, now I believe Baltimore was probably one of the only NFL. Every single high school and college football team out there has a marching band. Okay, but when it comes to the National Football League, Baltimore was one of the only teams that actually had a marching band. The Baltimore Colts marching band, to be exact. And the Colts basically, it was built into the community. All right, this is a team where you had very good turnouts. You were pretty much selling out pretty much every single game. It was literally tied into the entire community. Okay, and Baltimore couldn't ask for anything more. Okay. The problem was Memorial Stadium was not. It was out of shape, and the ownership, they were trying to get a new facility, or at the very least renovations to Memorial Stadium in order to make it more competitive and more up to date, to make it more competitive, stuff like that. Okay. Both the city of Baltimore and the state of Maryland, they kept playing politics left and right. Okay. So let's take a look. All right. So. Okay. So the first case of requesting for a new stadium comes in 1969 when then owner Carol Rosenblum, has requested funding to renovate Memorial Stadium or build a new stadium itself. Okay, City of Baltimore announced in May 1969 that it would seek a substantial increase in Memorial Stadium rental fees from co-owner Rosenblum and the team itself. Okay, Rosenblum at this point had already called Memorial Stadium antiquated and had threatened to move the Colts' home games out of the stadium unless improvements were made. Rosenblum even considered coughing up 12 to million. He wound up considering coughing up 12 to $20 million of his own money to help fund the building of a new football-only stadium on land in adjoining Baltimore County. In 1971, Rosenblum announced that the Colts would not return to Baltimore Stadium when their lease ran out following the 1972 season, and that he was not interested in negotiating with the city no more. And this was largely in part because he finally had enough of the bullshit going on um, at the city and state levels. Okay. However, Rosenblum had wanted out of Baltimore for many reasons. He was not happy with the team's revenue. He was having problems with the Baltimore Orioles ownership relating to revenues. He was having to split the ownership and stuff. He was having a running feud with the Baltimore press, and his he had just gotten married to a lady. You may remember her, Georgia Frontier. All right, or at the time her name was Georgia Rosenblum. She would eventually, we'll explain it more in just a moment, but she had desires to move him to the West Coast, or at least my research is saying. His new wife happens to be Georgia. All right, who wound up inheriting the. She wound up inheriting. Let's talk about that in just a moment. After the 1971 season, Rosenblum decided that he was going to, instead of relocating the Colts out of Baltimore, he was going to switch franchises. And basically, the person who was willing to switch with him was in L.A., Robert Irsay, who at the time was the owner of the Los Angeles Rams. Okay? Rosenblum and Irsay engaged in a franchise swap after the 1971 season, in which Rosenblum took over the LA Rams while Irsay took over the Colts. Georgia, as I was just mentioned a moment ago, she inherently became the owner of the LA Rams after Rosenblum died during the 1979 offseason from drowning. Okay, let's talk about. Okay, Carol Rosenblum died April 2nd, 1979. While swimming in Golden Beach, Florida. Okay. He wound up leaving the team to his wife, Georgia. Okay. She inherited 70% ownership stake of the Rams. Rosenblum's 5 children inherited the remaining 30%. Okay. He did it. He gave the team to his wife for tax purposes and stuff. Okay. And inadvertently, Georgia wound up firing his son. She wound up firing her stepson, Steve, during the offseason and took a job with the New Orleans Saints. Okay. So, Rosenblum was also the one that was responsible for relocating the LA Rams from the Coliseum to Orange County after the 1979 season. It was largely in part because they were looking for a smaller venue to avoid the blackouts, stuff like that. Plus, they were also not happy with the Coliseum itself. Okay, but anyway, going back to the Baltimore Colts. Okay, Irsay took over the team. There was a lot of controversy going on. Okay, that community feeling with the Colts eventually went away because Irsay, he was not willing to give the Colts. He didn't want the public having the same says. He didn't want to have that same feeling that was in place when Rosenblum was in charge. Irsay, he basically would brag about saying, like, I bought the team with my own money. This is my team. This is not yours. It is mine. And I can do whatever the fuck I want with it. Okay? That was his attitude. And he had some drinking problems, too. Especially after his after he suffered debts in the family. Okay, but anyway, in 1971, um, Baltimore Mayor William Donald Schaefer and Maryland Governor Marvin Mandel, they want to create a stadium committee to examine the city's stadium needs. Okay, which was a huge blow to Memorial Stadium. They found that 10,000 of the stadium seats had poor views of the field. 20,000 seats were outdated bench seats that had no back support. 7,000 seats were poorly constructed temporary bleachers that were installed for football games only. Also, there was not enough office space for the front offices of either the Orioles or Colts, much less both teams combined. Both teams had to share locker rooms. The upper deck of Memorial Stadium did not circle the field, ending instead at the 50-yard line. Any expansion plans for the stadium had usually mentioned less attractive and less expensive end zone seats, not upper deck seating. The number of bathroom facilities in Memorial Stadium were also deemed inadequate. So that is where the Baltodome comes into play. It was a project that was introduced to replace Memorial Stadium. This stadium it would be built near the city's inner harbor, known as Camden Yards, and it would accommodate 70,000 fans for football games, 55,000 for baseball, and it would also serve as a 20,000 seat arena for hockey or basketball if they were to lure NHL or NBA basketball into Baltimore, then they would be happy to take them in to the Baltodome, where it would serve as a 20,000 seat attendance for either one of those sports. So this stadium was going to cost $78 million back in, this is 1970s money, by the way. City would build a facility that would keep all parties happy. Okay. Orioles owner Hofberger, Colts owner Irsay, the Stadium Complex Authority, and Baltimore Mayor Schaefer and Governor Mandel, they basically were all on board with this particular project. However, it required it required public funding in order to make the project. It required public funding to make this project a reality, and it required a vote through the state legislature, which unfortunately the support was not there through the state legislature. Okay. In spite of assurances that contributions from taxpayers would be limited strictly to city and state loans, it was voted down by the state legislature, and on February 27th, 1974, Governor Mandel pulled the plug on the Baltodome. Okay. It was around the same time, where Hyman Pressman, who was the comptroller to the city of Baltimore, he was against using any public funds to build a new stadium. Okay, so during the 1974 elections that year, they introduced a ballot proposition called Question P that would prohibit the city of Baltimore from using public funds towards for construction of any other stadium. Okay, it would declare the 33rd Street Stadium as a memorial to war veterans and prohibited use of city funds for construction of any other stadium. Measure was voted by the public. It wound up passing by a vote of 56 to 44%. And the same political motivations that had been used to upgrade Baltimore Stadium, originally built in 1922 in the late 40s and renamed Memorial Stadium, effectively destroyed any chance of a new modern sports complex being built in Baltimore. So when all this came to be, Robert Irsay began exploring relocation for the Baltimore Colts. Okay, he said, if we're not going to make progress here, the only thing to do is to start looking elsewhere. And that's exactly what he started doing. He wound up reaching out to a bunch of during the late 70s, in the early 80s, Robert Irsay began exploring a wide variety of cities throughout the country to relocate the Colts. So these were markets that were in the process of trying to build new stadiums or at the very least had an interest of inheriting an NFL franchise of their own. These were included Jacksonville, Florida, Memphis, Tennessee, Birmingham, Alabama, Indianapolis, Indiana, and Phoenix, Arizona. Okay, so he kept reaching out to all of these particular markets, and at one point, he even had interest. He even expressed interest from the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Okay, see, when the Rams left the Coliseum at the end of the '79 season, the Coliseum was looking for a new tenant to take over. And at one point, they were willing to take in anybody. Okay, and when they found out that Irsay was looking at relocating the Colts, they sent out an invitation to Irsay saying, "Hey, bring the Colts out to L.A. We'd love to have you." And those plans eventually folded when Al Davis agreed to relocate the Raiders to Los Angeles. And that move wound up taking a 2-year battle in court before he was finally allowed to do that. Okay. Okay, so we had, let's see, Gator Bowl was also an interest as well. Okay. In the mid 1970s, the National Football League had planned to expand from 26 to 28 teams as an agreed part of the National Football League American Football League merger. Indianapolis was one of the 10 cities combined. Indianapolis was one of 10 cities that were considered for expansion during the mid 1970s. Okay, it was considered a strong candidate because it was located at the junction of more major highways than any other city and had a large population in both the metropolis and surrounding rural areas. When they made the final decision in 1974, Indianapolis got rejected because of one reason. Indianapolis did not have a suitable stadium. And this by itself inspired the city of Indianapolis to construct the Hoosier Dome, which would later become the RCA Dome, which would be built, they began construction in 1982, and it would be ready in time for 1984. Okay. The construction of the stadium was basically to show the National Football League that they were considered very serious about bringing the National Football League to their market. Okay, and they were willing to get the NFL one way or another, whether it was through relocation or expansion. Okay. So many years had gone by, and after the 1983 season, things started to get pretty hot. Okay, it eventually came down to two major. Irsay was down to just two markets, which were Phoenix and Indianapolis. Okay. New York City even made a pitch by this point because the Jets had just left Shea Stadium to join the Giants at Giant Stadium in New Jersey. Okay. And they basically, New York City's argument was, the Giants and Jets do not play in the state of New York. They play in New Jersey. So that would technically make New York City an NFL-less market. We would like for you to bring the Colts to our city. Eventually, he didn't really buy it. Okay. March 2nd, 1984, National Football League owners, they wanted voting to give Jim Irsay permission to relocate the franchise to the city of his choosing if he wanted to relocate. So it not only gave Irsay permission to move the franchise, but he could move it to anywhere he wanted. Okay? He was given a very good card. Okay? So basically, they kept, of course, Irsay kept pitching out to, he kept pitching out to Maryland and the city of Baltimore for funds to either renovate Memorial Stadium or to expand. And there was one proposal that did come to hand but it was only going to be. This was in January of 1984. Okay. Basically, they were not able to get. They were only going to approve it on the condition that the Colts and Orioles were both going to sign long-term commitments to Memorial Stadium, and neither one of them were willing to do it. Okay. Baltimore Mayor Schaefer even went as far as saying, "We're not going to build a new stadium. We do not have the bonding capacity. We don't have the voters or taxpayers who can support a $60 million stadium. One-third of the people in Baltimore pay taxes. Unless private enterprise builds it, we will not build it." All right. Meanwhile, the press kept harassing Irsay everywhere he went, whether it was in Baltimore or Indianapolis or Phoenix or anywhere else he was. All right. And he finally had enough. All right. They kept harassing him over like the possible chance of the Colts relocating, even though the Colts had a very good, strong fan base in the market, and they had very good attendance. It all came down to the stadium. Okay. And it was basically, and okay, of course, Baltimore and Maryland, they were both looking through a thick wall. Like normally in today's age, this particular behavior would indicate that Irsay is serious about relocating the teams. We better do what we better offer him whatever he wants. Otherwise we're going to lose our team. Okay. Other markets, and I'll get to this in a little bit. Okay. But basically, Phoenix Metropolitan Sports Foundation, headed by developer Eddie Lynch and Governor Bruce Babbitt, and amongst other top officials, they met secretly with Irsay in 1984 about talks about basically Phoenix was offering Irsay a below-market rate of $15 million loan and rent-free use of the 71,000-seat Sun Devil Stadium on the campus of Arizona State University. A second meeting was scheduled between Irsay and the Phoenix group, but when that second meeting got leaked out to the media, Irsay canceled because he wasn't willing to take the heat from this. Okay. Pete Rozelle, who was the NFL commissioner at the time, he was even approached about this at the state of the NFL address that he gives every year around the Super Bowl, and basically says that at this point, expansion has been put on hold. So the only way anybody was going to get anybody, so at this point, the only way anybody was going to get a franchise was through relocation. Okay. So once the word got out about it, Indiana Pacers owner Herb Simon had contacted Colts officials in Baltimore to try to take negotiations between the club and Indianapolis to the next level. They were basically, Indianapolis had approached Baltimore saying, "You know what? We're not gonna. We had just built this brand new stadium in the lure of trying to help of getting a NFL expansion team, and Pete Rozelle says that the expansion is on hold. We would really love for you to come to Indianapolis, and we're willing to do anything we can to make it happen." Okay. So they were offered a $12.5 million loan, a $4 million training complex, and the use of a $77.5 million, 57,980 seat Hoosier Dome. Okay, that's what they were offered. Okay, they really had to. D-Day was approaching quickly because by the end of March, okay, in March of 1987, okay, some idiot or some genius in the Maryland General Assembly thought it would be a good idea to propose an eminent domain bill that would give the city of Baltimore the power to seize the Colts franchise away from Irsay. Their argument was, Baltimore loves its Colts. It's part of our culture. We have very strong fan base. We have very strong viewership, and we feel that Ursay is abusing us. And we're gonna take this team away. We're gonna seize this property away from Ursay and sell it to somebody else who is willing to keep the team in Baltimore. Okay. Meanwhile, at the same time, these same idiots, all right, are sitting there playing games with Ursay, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can't go nowhere. Okay, we are not going to do any upgrades. You are going to have to stay here and play and have your team play in a hostile environment. All right, we're not giving you any money. You're on, okay, and you guys are not going anywhere." That was kind of the attitude that was going to play. Okay. By the time the eminent domain bill was being introduced to the state assembly, Ursay took it personally. And once word got out about the eminent domain bill, Phoenix called and said, "We're out." Indianapolis was the only one left. And guess what? Ursay immediately signed a deal with the mayor of Indianapolis. Okay. So, okay. Phoenix Group withdrew its offer on March 28th, citing the Maryland state's actions. They wound up passing. The state Senate had just passed the eminent domain bill, and it was on its way into the state house. And all it needed to do was not pass the house and get this governor's signature, and then the bill would make its way to the city of Baltimore, which would give the mayor the power to go into the Colts office and basically seize the team away from Ursay, saying, "Sorry, Ursay, it's ours now. Get lost." So Ursay basically saw he taking he was not too happy about the eminent domain, and rightfully so. And he realized the only way he's going to be able to keep the team was by getting out of there immediately. Indianapolis was still on the table, and he signed with them right on the spot. And as soon as he got off the phone, Mayor Hudnut of Indianapolis called his neighbor and friend, who happened to have been the chief executive officer for Mayflower Transit, an Indiana-based moving company. Okay, Hudnut had asked him to move the teams. He said, "Hey, I just signed a deal to relocate the Baltimore Colts to Indianapolis. There is an eminent domain bill going through the state legislature, and we need to get that team out of there tonight. There's the possibility that that team may get seized by the city government as early as tomorrow morning. So we need to get that team out of here tonight. What can you do to help?" So he dispatched 15 moving trucks and a shitload of employees out to the Owning Mills, the Baltimore Colts headquarters out in Ownings Mills. Okay. And basically, as early as around 10 p.m., first trucks showed up, and they started loading everything in the trucks that was not bolted to the walls. Football helmets, football jerseys, training equipment, footballs, team equipment, the staff's office, like their desks, their phones, their typewriters, their lamps, their writing instruments, their files, anything that was not bolted to the walls was being taken out of there in a rapid rate and was being loaded onto these trucks. As soon as one truck was full to the brim, it was ordered out of there immediately. Each truck was ordered to take a different route out of the state of Maryland, in an effort to prevent state police from stopping the convoy. And once they made it to the state of Indiana, the, the state borderline, they would be escorted by Indiana State Police from the state border all the way to the city of Indianapolis. The last moving truck, it took about 8 hours. So by around 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, the last trucks were out of there, and the Colts were officially gone. Later in the day, State House eventually passed the eminent domain bill by a vote of 103 in favor to 19 opposed. Governor Hughes signed the bill. By the time it made it to the governor's desk, the team was officially gone, and the only use of the bill by that point would have been to take over the empty facility and the property that they were at. Okay. It did leave the entire city of Baltimore with broken hearts, and I do apologize to the city. I do apologize to those who had been upset about the team about Baltimore losing their team. But at the same time, okay, this is a prime example that basically set a future wave. That this is a story that was learned. That was a lesson that was learned for future relocations from that point on. Okay. Basically, the moral of the story is, all right. Now, even though I feel bad about the Colts losing their team and everything about them, including the team name and history and stuff. The moral of the story is, okay, it doesn't matter how long you've been in that market, whether it's been 12 years, like the Raiders were in Los Angeles, or 30 years, which the Colts were in Baltimore, or 49 years, which the Rams were in Southern California, before a 21-year hiatus to St. Louis. We'll cover that in a little bit. You want to stay, you better have if you want the team to stay, you're going to have to cough up the funds to make it happen. All right. There is controversy over the usage of public funds being used for this, but at the same time, you have to look at the economic benefits of it. Okay, if investing this much money is going to bring you a bigger impact, a better outcome at the end of the day, like sporting games as a whole, it brings in huge money to the market. Ticket revenues, parking fees, concession stands. Those who are coming from out of town, they stayed hotels, possible rental cars. Those they dine in at restaurants and stuff. It's a huge economic impact. Okay, if that economic impact, all right, is going to be very beneficial for you at the end of the day, then it is a good idea to invest a little bit of money in order for it to happen. Okay. All Irsay wanted was a new stadium, or at the very least, renovations. And at the end of the day, city and state politicians kept playing bullshit. They kept playing shit games with Irsay, and the press was no better too. Irsay had and the state assembly, they are the ones to blame for this by shoving the eminent domain. If the state legislature had not shoved that eminent domain bill like they did, Irsay would not have moved the cult out of there in such a fast tone. Okay? So, yes, you can blame Irsay for wanting out of there, but at the same time, I don't blame him because even though it was heartbreaking to um, for Baltimore to lose their Colts, the city and state should not have. They shouldn't have treated him like they did. Okay. In the aftermath, so basically, NFL was not willing to. They had just lost an antitrust lawsuit at the time to Al Davis, who has spent 2 years in court relocating the Raiders from Oakland to Los Angeles. So they were not in the mood of going to court or anything. But at the end of the day, and yes, Indianapolis did get taken to court by the city of Baltimore over the use of the team name and the history and all that shit. At the end of the day, okay, 2 years after the relocation happened, all lawsuits and stuff had gotten settled out. And at the end of the day, the only thing Baltimore had left was the Lombardi Trophy that the Colts won for Super Bowl V in 1971. Okay? Indianapolis wound up inheriting the team's name, the uniforms, the team history, and all that shit. And Baltimore was left with nothing. Okay? But the only thing that Baltimore wound up having left at the end of the day, in addition to the Lombardi Trophy, was the marching band. Okay? Because they were not entirely, even though they played for all the Colts games, they were not considered a piece of property of the Colts football team. Okay? But the band kept playing, and they wound up doing everything they could to getting the National Football League back to Baltimore. Okay? Took a long time, but all their efforts finally paid off. All right? Football would eventually return to Baltimore by 1985. The United States Football League which was a spring minor league football team in the mid-1980s. They had a team called the Philadelphia Stars, who were the defending league champions. They had just relocated from Philadelphia to Baltimore, becoming the Baltimore Stars. Because it was a spring league and Baltimore Orioles were not wanting football linings on their field throughout their whole season, the Orioles were not, they didn't allow the Stars to play their home games at Memorial Stadium. They wound up having to play at another location. The Baltimore Stars eventually won the league championship that first year. During the 1986 season, USFL was planning on moving to a fall schedule and going head-to-head with the National Football League. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, the USFL wind up folding due to the NFL's monopolistic policies. Okay. And basically, by this point, had the USFL moved forward with their fall season, then the Stars would have been allowed to play in Memorial Stadium during that year. But because the league folded in 1986, they weren't able to get a taste of it. Okay. In the early 1990s, the Baltimore Colts marching band, they kept playing. They wound up marching. They did parades. They kept playing in all these different places. They were eventually invited to play at the Cleveland Browns home games. Okay, Art Modell, who at the time was the owner of the Cleveland Browns, he invited the Colts marching band to perform at least one game each year at Cleveland Municipal Stadium. Cleveland is a huge marching band town, and they were always more welcome to have the Colts band there, even though they had no team to root for. And they eventually won over the fan support everywhere they went. In 1991, the Colts marching band was invited to participate at the NFL Hall of Fame game. And even though they won over the fan support, Commissioner was not too he's still not too thrilled. Okay, which at the time they changed commissioners at the time, which was Paul Tagliabue. Okay, who had taken over the reign in 1989 when Pete Rozelle retired due to health concerns. Okay, Paul was not too happy. I mean, he was not too thrilled, but he publicly embraced the Colts marching band for being there. It basically, they'd done everything they could. National Football League even gave the city of Baltimore a preseason game featuring the Miami Dolphins and some other team. And you can have this preseason game. See if you can sell tickets to it. They sold out. It didn't help their cause. In the early 90s, the National Football League announced they were going to expand from 28 to 30 NFL teams. Baltimore and St. Louis, both of whom lost their NFL franchises in the 1980s. Oh, by the way, St. Louis Cardinals after the 87 season, the St. Louis Cardinals relocated to Phoenix, Arizona in 1988 and became the Phoenix Cardinals. And in 1994, they changed their name to the Arizona Cardinals because the Cardinals franchise, they wanted to reach out to the entire state of Arizona instead of just the city of Phoenix, even though Phoenix had a majority of the population. Okay? Cardinals were paid Sun Stadium until the end of the 2005 season when they wind up moving into their current stadium, State Farm Stadium, which they are still playing in to this date. Okay, opened up in 2006, and they're still playing it to this date. Okay. So anyway, so in the early 90s, you had Baltimore and St. Louis, both of whom had lost their franchises in the 1980s due to relocation. They both applied for expansion teams, and they were both passed over, believe it or not, for markets that had yet to get a taste of an NFL experience. Okay. Expansion teams went to the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, both of whom started in the fall of 1995. But of course, they didn't give up. After the announcement of that Baltimore was not getting an expansion team, a huge supporter. Let's see. Who else do we have here? Jim Spiros. Okay, that's the guy right there. He was he was an American businessman who had played college football for Clemson University. Okay. And was also an assistant coach for the Washington Redskins and the Buffalo Bills. All right. He put down a $100,000 deposit to bring Canadian football. That's right, Canadian football to the city of Baltimore. Because at the time, Canadian football was wanting to conduct an experiment, and they wanted to reach out to the south of the border into the United States. So they wound up launching a handful of teams across the U.S. And of course, all of these markets none of these markets had an NFL team. You had Shreveport. You had Sacramento, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, San Antonio, Texas. You had Shreveport, Louisiana. You had Baltimore. I think you had one or two other markets. Okay, I don't know what that was, but let's take a look at it. Okay. Sacramento, LA, San Antonio, Shreveport, Memphis, and Birmingham. All right. So these got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they had 7 teams, a 7-team expansion into the United States. And none of these markets had an NFL franchise at the time. Okay. Baltimore was the only one that actually had success, and they wound up becoming the Baltimore. Okay. They wanted to name it the Baltimore Colts, but of course the Indianapolis Colts barred in Baltimore from using that Colts name on their team. So they wound up calling it the Baltimore football team for the first year. Then in the second year, they were able to make a deal to where they would be called the Baltimore Stallions. Okay, Stallions was similar to the name Colts, and they were able to get away with it too. So they settled on Stallions for a team name. Okay. Towards the end of 1995, Baltimore finally got the news they had been waiting for. The National Football League would be coming back. Unfortunately, it would come at a cost. It would come as a direct result of yet another controversial sports relocation, even more controversial than the Colts moving to Indianapolis overnight. You know where we're going with this one? It is the Cleveland Browns moving to Baltimore. Okay? So in this one, in the early 90s, Cleveland decided to build a brand new sports district. With it came a brand new basketball arena for the Cavaliers and a brand new Major League Baseball ballpark for the Cleveland Indians. When it came time to look at the Cleveland Browns, who were playing in a out-of-date, worn out, ready to be falling apart Cleveland Municipal Stadium, there was nothing there to help them. They were not able to help them out. Nor was there the political willingness to make it work. Okay? Cleveland had run out of money. Art Modell, who had owned Cleveland Municipal Stadium for most of his tenure as owner of the Cleveland Browns, he took over maintenance of the Municipal Stadium. He basically came up and says, "I'm broke. I have no money, and I really need your help. I would like either a new stadium, or at the very least, my stadium needs huge renovations in order for it to stay afloat." Okay. And of course, Cleveland City Council, they said we're not. They didn't want to hear anything about relocation, but they didn't want to hear Modell threatening about relocation because they knew. Here's the thing: Cleveland had very good turnout. They had very good attendance in their stadium, nearly selling out every single game. They were the third highest. They were like the third highest attendance in the entire NFL. One of the top rated markets for television ratings in the U.S. for NFL games. Okay, don't get. Okay, you are selling out. You have very good team attendance. You have very good, huge television revenue coming through. Don't give me this bullshit that you're broke. And I don't want to hear one fucking word about the NFL moving away, because we know the NFL is never going to do that. We don't have to do one fucking thing for you. This is the kind of attitude that the Cleveland City Council was acting towards Modell. Modell had done everything to help them out. And after the Indians left Marsupial Stadium, he lost even more money. And yet nobody believed it. Okay? They were able to work together on a proposition for $175 million worth of renovations towards Marsupial Stadium. Okay? And that was going to be on the ballot. But Modell figured, okay, even before it went to the ballot, or even before it was even voted on, okay, while it was in the process of being voted on, before the final results came out, Art Modell figured City Council has turned their backs on me. They're not willing to help me out. I'm up against the wall. I really need, okay? And I think it's in the best interest at this time for me to relocate to another market, which he began looking at. And eventually Baltimore, who had lost the Colts in 1984, they were willing to provide Modell with anything that he wanted. Okay? They signed a deal. Okay, they basically signed a deal for $200 million plus. Okay. So that's let's see. They approved the funding to build a brand new state-of-the-art stadium for Art Modell and to bring the team back to bring his team to Baltimore. And they were also going to they also agreed to a signing bonus, which was enough to pay off Modell's debts in its entirety. Okay. In November of 1995, about a day or two before the renovation ballot was supposed to be voted on by the city citizens, by the citizens of Cleveland. They basically came out and said, announcements came out saying that the Browns were going to be relocating to Baltimore for the 1996 season. And it caused huge backlash for the entire city of Cleveland. City officials were even shocked. They were sitting there all cocky saying, "Oh, we're not going. We've already taken care of the Cavaliers and the and the Indians. There's no way in fucking hell that the NFL is going to let the Browns leave. So we're not going to do anything about them. Wake up and smell the coffee, fuckos. Of course, you just realized that earlier that year, the NFL allowed the Rams to leave Southern California after 49 seasons. All right? Anything can happen. So now they're horrified. Okay? But of course, this move got taken to court. And, okay, and for those of you wondering, okay, what happened with that vote on the proposition, it passed by a huge margin. So, as a direct result of these lawsuits that took out, Art Modell had agreed to give Cleveland back its team name, its team history, its colors, anything to do with the Browns, okay? Modell still had possession of Cleveland's contracts with their players and stuff. But Cleveland was going to be given, they were going to get back their team name, their colors, their uniforms, their team history, and then it was going to go into the books where the Baltimore Ravens would be designated as an expansion franchise, while the Cleveland Browns would pause operations for a few years. Okay, so the $175 million that was on the ballot that was initially passed by the city of Cleveland, it was originally supposed to be used for renovations to Municipal Stadium, but now that money was going to be used towards tearing out Municipal Stadium and replacing it with a brand new facility. All right. Yes, it is sad to see old landmarks go down, but Municipal Stadium was in dire straits, and it needed to be repaired badly. And they figured, if we're going to start off with a brand new Browns team, we better make it right. We're going to build a brand new stadium on the location to make it right. So they took the debris from the old Municipal Stadium. They wind up dumping it into Lake Erie. So there's a graveyard for Municipal Stadium in the bottom of Lake Erie. Okay, and they wind up building a new stadium on the same ground where Municipal Stadium previously stood. Okay. Baltimore wind up getting. They had the NFL back. Art Modell decided to rename the team and adopt new colors and stuff. So he opened up a citywide survey of input. What can we do? What can we name this new team? And after a citywide search, they had their answer: the Baltimore Ravens. Okay. The Ravens was named after a famous poem called "The Raven," written by Edgar Allan Poe, one of the greatest poets in American literature. Okay, had a huge history in the city of Baltimore. Born January 1809, died October 1849, at the age of 40. Okay, his most famous. Let's see. He's had a wide variety of poems and stuff. Raven is one of his most famous works, but some of his other poems include, but are not limited to, El Dorado, City in the Sea, The Bells, Annabel Lee, Leonore, Tamerlane, A Dream Within a Dream. He also wrote a series of short stories, including but not limited to The Murders of Rue Morgue, Oval Portrait, and probably the most important, probably the most famous one of them all, The Telltale Heart. It's a tongue twister, isn't it? Okay. So he had a huge presence in the city of Baltimore, and the Raven was one of his greatest pieces of work. So that's what they decided to name the team after the Ravens. Okay. A more appropriate pick. Okay. Now, of course, stadiums don't go up overnight, so the Baltimore Ravens they wound up having to play the first 2 years in Baltimore in the old Memorial Stadium, and they also hired the old Baltimore Colts marching band to join them. Okay, because the marching band had been a huge integral part of the city's heritage, they decided to invite the Colts marching band as part of to be part of the family. So the marching band had a family once again. They figured, okay, we're going to let them play as the Colts marching band and play the Colts fight song through the end of until we are done playing in Memorial Stadium. And then once we move over to M&T Bank Stadium in time for the 1998 season, we will change them into Baltimore's Marching Ravens with a new fight song, might I add. Okay, so hope I don't get in. Hope I don't get copyright infringement for this. But we're going to play a small segment of this Baltimore Colts song. Okay, after they're done playing commercials. Okay, just so you guys. All right, we're gonna be done. All right, that's it. All right, that's about as close as I'm gonna get to without being sued for copyright infringement. Okay, so there you have it. All right, Baltimore finally got the NFL team back, but unfortunately at the expense of Cleveland losing theirs, at least on a temporary basis. NFL learned their lesson, and they were able to make it right. And even though Baltimore, the team was going to stay in Baltimore, they were able to make amends back to Cleveland by basically awarding them with another team. They get to keep the Browns' name and the team history, and the Cleveland Browns would eventually take the field again, starting in 1999. Okay, in order to offset, because the new Cleveland Browns team became the 31st franchise, and it winded up messing up the league. So part of the deal for the Cleveland Browns team for the new franchise, they had to be played in the same division as Pittsburgh and Baltimore. Okay, that's why we have what we have right now. Okay, it created a huge mess to a point where in 1999, once the Browns were up and running, the NFL decided to create a 32nd NFL expansion team and do a huge realignment to correspond with it. Okay, it would be now of course it would be an AFC team is what it wound up coming down to. And they originally, since LA had lost the NFL a few years prior, they were given first dibs at that 32nd franchise. But unfortunately, there were way too many groups and too many sites competing with each other, and nobody's willing to work with one another to make it work. The NFL basically said, next. And then you had the city of Houston, who would lose their Oilers to Tennessee not long after the Browns moved to Baltimore. They were very angry about losing the Oilers. They had a more clear, concise plan about when they put in a bid for the 32nd expansion team. It was more clear, it was more concise, and they were more aggressive to making it work. So they basically awarded that 32nd franchise to Houston and made them the Houston Texans. Okay? Okay? So the relocation of Cleveland to Baltimore wound up creating a congressional hearing. It wound up ignited a congressional hearing at the U.S. Congress about the dire urgency to address sports relocations and try to make it tougher to make a team relocate to another market, which is why you had about 18, 19 year went like 18, 19 years without a sports relocation in the NFL. Once the Oilers moved to Tennessee, you didn't have another You didn't have another relocation until January 2016, when the Rams relocated from St. Louis back to Los Angeles. Okay, so so that is how Baltimore lost. That's the history of how Baltimore lost the NFL and got the NFL back. All right, but at least you guys got it back. There's other places that say, "Hey, we are still waiting to get our stuff back." All right. There is we can talk about it in another video because there's a lot to talk about. Like we can talk sports relocations in another video, but this is specifically the Colts moving from from Baltimore to Indianapolis. Okay. We'll have more in a future video, but make sure that you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on those future reviews and editorials. Until the next time we meet, I'm Mr. Wildcat, reminding each and every one of you to be good, be careful, and behave. Go Wildcats!